All right, so the Florida Gators landed another commitment today. Offensive tackle Fletcher Westfall. This is reported on Swamp 24/7 by Blake Alderman. The Florida Gators have been looking to keep building their offensive line, especially at the tackle position, and pulled off a big win on Monday morning by landing a commitment from Leesburg, Virginia, Tuscora. I hope I'm saying that right. Four-star offensive lineman Fletcher Westfall. Arkansas, Auburn, Clemson, Florida, and Georgia were all finalists for the top 24/7 big man. He was just on a Peak Inside Florida Gators football. It's a channel run by Ali Peak who does reporting on Florida Gator football program. Makes excellent content. I've been becoming a big fan of hers since she's started because her content has gotten better and better, and it seems like she's a very astute journalist. And she got an interview with Fletcher Westphal, and he said that before he committed, he told Billy Napier, the head coach of Florida, that he committed to Florida on the 6th, but he didn't announce it till today, and that his top three was obviously Florida because he committed, but outside of that was Arkansas and Clemson. So Florida had to beat out a very good program in the Clemson Tigers to get Mr. Westfall's services. I really like that they are truly the everything school, Westfall told Swamp 24/7 before he announced his decision to the public. They checked off so many boxes for me. The players have so many things available for them. With Clemson, they have the Paul journey, and at Florida, they have the Gator made, right? The O-line aspect you can get at Arkansas. Well, at Florida, you have the dual O-line coaches. The academic standpoint at Florida, Florida separated them of the school in the top five. They were the best academic school. Fletcher Westphal is going to be coming in at Florida at 6'8", 330 pounds. Like, you can't teach size. You can teach technique. You can coach strength and conditioning. You can teach nutrition. You can teach skills. You cannot teach that kind of size for an offensive lineman. Um, with Florida, they let you know they have strong academics, but they are not trying to shove it down your throat. They tell you they are the second best academic school in the SEC because they aren't going to give you more than Vanderbilt. They are the best public education in the SEC, and they are fifth for public education. We have a top business school, and they are really the everything school. They have a huge alumni base as well. Sitting down and talking academics with them, they laid out everything in terms of flat out academic standpoint. They have what they have. No other school in my top five, and my specific business degree has that kind of repertoire. So this was a very good get for Florida. Florida has built one of the best recruiting classes that they've had since recruiting evaluation science became more prevalent in college football today. It's like 247, like On Three, like Rivals, like ESPN 300, and other recruiting evaluation sites. And this has been a great class for Florida this year. Last year they had a good class, but they missed out on some big name targets: Kamani McLean, uh, Francis Mauga, Samson Okinola, Jordan Hall, John Walker. But this time they're landing big name recruits, and they're also bolstering positions of strength because before the summer they already had our Darius Hayes and Miles Graham at the linebacker spot, but they still added an Aaron Childs and a Jamonte Waller. They had a pretty good defensive back class last year, but they still added an Xavier Filsaime. And defensive line, they had another good class. Kelby Collins, T.J. Searcy, Will Norman, Gavin Hill, and Cameron James. But they still went ahead and added some more depth at that position. Michael Boyle, I hope I'm saying his name right. Amaris Williams, Nazir Johnson from Dublin, Georgia. So they're just bolstering positions of strength in their recruiting class. And Fletcher Westphal, in my opinion, was a big gift for Florida because I think offensive line was their biggest need in this recruiting class. They already had a couple of offensive line commitments. They got a international offensive lineman out from Germany, and Mike Williams. He's a big offensive tackle, about 6'7", 310 pounds, and then they have Fletcher Westphal, who's 6'8", 330. So they are building very, 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 very a very big offensive line there in Gainesville, and I think it's a good job the recruiting that the Napier and the staff has done. And I'm gonna bring up a good point here. You know, a couple of years ago, when Mario Cristobal was hired to Miami, there was a lot of expectations for Miami, right? Because Mario Cristobal has uh, a history of very good recruiting classes during his time at Oregon, and how he was able to build Oregon into a Pac-12 powerhouse, winning a couple of Pac-12 titles while he was there. And so people thought he was going to be even better than what he was at what he was at Oregon at Miami, because it's Miami, it's South Florida, it's the Sunshine State. There's plenty to enjoy about living here in Florida. So at Miami, they thought he was just going to dominate in recruiting, and well, last year he kind of did. He added two big uh, five-star offensive tackles. He had Kamani McLean, but he would eventually flip to Colorado. But he still added like a Malik Bryant, a Raul Aguirre, and other big name players. And he had a very nice transfer portal, more so building the offensive line. But this year, uh, per 24/7 Sports, I think they had the Miami ranked like in the 20s. So we're gonna check that out right now. Team rankings, and here it is. There's Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, and then there's Florida at 3. We're gonna go down to there's Florida State at 15, and Miami is at 21. Well, I think a big part of that was because of how everything fell apart for Miami last year. I mean, last year I had Miami going 9-3 because there was so much hype about the coaching class that Miami was putting together. They added Josh Gaddis, who helped Michigan win the Big Ten in 2021. Then they added Kevin Steele as the defense coordinator. They had Charlie Strong as the linebackers coach, and they had one of Georgia's assistant coaches coaching the secondary. And last year for Miami was not good. I already covered that in my Miami Hurricanes record prediction video. I talked about how they went 5-7, missed the bowl game, got blown out by Middle Tennessee, turned the ball over 8 times versus Duke. There was just a lot of bad things that did not go Miami's way last year. Also getting blown out by Florida State the way that they did. And I think that's a big part of it. And now after that, they lost majority of the assistants that they had brought in last year. They lost Charlie Strong. They lost their two coordinators. They lost the running backs coach. They lost one of their assistants and watched their development and recruiting. So it was just a lot of turmoil and a lot of turnover in their football staff. And I think that's part of the reason why they're kind of struggling this year, because they saw how bad because I think recruits see how bad Miami's team was last year, and now they're like, is that really the program we want to go to at Miami? And not only was the football team bad, the crowd attendance for Miami was one of the worst you could see for a Power 5 program. I think the only Power 5 program that had worse attendance than Miami last year was maybe UCLA. And UCLA actually had a good team last year. Miami didn't. So you kind of understood why fans didn't want to show up for Miami, because they weren't any good. And and if you're a Hurricanes fan, you should be looking at this like, okay, we bring in Mario Cristobal because of the elite recruiting that he has done in the past, and he is capable of putting together good staff. Well, the good staff that he put together last year failed, and by he's getting out recruited by both Mike Novell and Billy Napier, when recruiting was supposed to be Mario's biggest asset, especially down in Miami. If you're a Hurricanes fan, you should be looking at this and thinking, okay, something's not right here. Either players just don't want to play for Miami anymore, or just maybe they just don't want to play for Mario Cristobal specifically, because this is not a good sign if you're a Hurricanes fan. If you're a Hurricanes fan, you should be very concerned about how your team has not done enough right now in the recruiting aspect, while Billy Napier in Florida, who was the butt of college football jokes from December all the way through about April, because of how they lost their final 3 games, including losing to Vanderbilt and the Jaden Rashada debacle, and losing Austin Simmons. They went from being the butt of the joke in college football to now actually being the storyline of college football in the summer, because of how great the recruiting has done. This is not a good telltale sign for Miami. And right now, Billy Napier is proving that currently he's the best recruiter in the state of Florida, not Mario Cristobal. And that was Mario Cristobal's biggest, so supposed to be his biggest strength, the biggest talking point that people had towards him when he got hired at Miami. Well, so far, he's not living up to it right now. And if there's no sign of improvement, then it's going to be a long time for Miami to turn around because Mario Cristobal is in the middle of a 10-year is in the early stages of a 10-year contract that he signed at Miami. So if there is not enough progression and improvement for Miami in both recruiting and on the football field over the next few years, it's going to be a long time before the Hurricanes can get out of that country and move on to something else. And if that were the case, that would be a big disappointment for not just the program, but for the fan base in general. But as back to go back to Billy Napier, I'm glad that he's getting the recruiting class that he's getting, and he's getting the props that he deserves right now because he has been the whipping boy of big media outlets in college football, like Barstool Sports and big game boomers. There was a guy from Barstool who said that Billy Napier was going to get fired at the end of the year. Well, he might want to retract this right now because it looks like the players are buying into Billy Napier and they're buying into what he's selling at Florida. And if players are still buying into him and they're not quitting on him, looks like Florida's gonna have a bright future ahead of them with all the talent that is headed to Gainesville.